shit. I know I laced it with blood.
What it is, what it shall be, and what it was. Shalom Aleichem, I'm Colin Coyle. Quick question. For all y'all people out there who love trivia, for the people that are free on Wednesday nights to go to mediocre bar/pizza places to impress their friends by how quickly they can Google things, I got a real stumper for you. Now, I'm sure you've heard of this before. It's considered an advanced level trivia question, but the question is this. What is one of the few things that Thomas the Apostle and George Michael of Wham do not have in common? I'll give you a second to Google. Can't wait for you to write that into Google and send that off into the ether and end up on a very weird list or get some very strange emails. The answer to that question is faith. One of them had it and one of them did not. Now, the obvious answer between the two is George Michael, right? Everyone knows George Michael's known for faith because you gotta have faith, the faith. Shit, that's a hot-ass track. And Thomas, on the other hand, he's known for literally doubting Jesus, despite being an apostle. And that sucks. Something that both of those men have in common would be the fact that they're probably both remembered for their worst moments in life. You know, for Thomas, that would be doubting the Messiah. And for George, that would be getting Minnesota-style frisky in a bathroom in public. But should any of those two things discredit the contributions to society? I mean, Thomas was a motherfucker apostle. Like, that's a pretty big devotion. And George Michael did some incredible charity work that no one wants to ever discuss or bring up when discussing him. Instead, they want to bring up the time he was sucking dick or getting dick sucked in a bathroom. Granted, don't do that. Very uncouth. We live in a polite society. At the same time, how about we bring up some of the other things in fairness? So what is faith? Faith's a weird question. It's a weird concept. It's a weird topic. What's it mean to you? Because I don't really have a good answer, and I usually have an answer to pretty much any question, usually even before you ask it to me. But faith for me has evolved wildly over my life. I mean, I've done 180s, 360s, 720s. I skipped 540s and 1080s. I'm basically a professional skateboarder. But I like, most people who look like me, I went to a Catholic kindergarten. And a fun fact for you, kindergarten is actually a German word that Hitler invented while playing the Sassoon. That's true. Feel free to Google that as soon as you're done with the George Michael Thomas thing. But in kindergarten, I mean, you're far too young to ask any serious questions, so if you go to a Catholic kindergarten, you're basically given like this hooked on phonics Bible edition thing where you're told the basics, you're told about Noah's Ark, you're told about Adam and Eve and how women will not stop nagging and it gets them in trouble. And you're told all this stuff. You're told, what communion is, what confession is, go in the box, tell the guy what you did wrong, he'll never say anything to anybody, take his word for it. I was someone who, even at the age of motherfucking 6, I wasn't buying it. I wasn't falling for it. I needed some cold, hard Bud Light facts. And believe it or not, it's hard to wrap your head around large conceptual ideas such as our reason for existence and is there a God when you're in 6th grade eating glue. But I've always been a dichotomy. And that's, I think, what's great about me and what's worse about me because everything's both. But faith evolves. So then fast forward around, I think it was first grade. So first grade, I end up leaving the Catholic school and I go to a nice, well-funded secular charter school. My parents, being people who were raised Catholic with a good, hearty sense of guilt, who both have problems with themselves that they would acknowledge, but there comes this attachment to guilt. And I think when you're a parent and you have a kid, one of the things that you try to do is almost right your wrongs through the kid. So like my parents, when I was super early, weren't really religious to my memory. I mean, they went to church Christmas and Easter, basic shit. Like they gave $100 once a year just to repent and avoid, less time in purgatory. But then, I'm in 2nd grade, and I'll never forget this. It was like the first week of class, and there was one paper where we had to what's your favorite movie? What's your favorite food? What's your favorite subject? And all those good questions. So I, despite, having a hard time wrapping my head around the concept of faith at, single digits in my early 6s, I still loved the subject. I've always loved history. That's, I think, what I've realized as I've gotten older. But I loved learning, about religion when I went to a religious school because it was essentially just history, only with far more fantastical tales and characters with significantly better names. Bartholomew, Melchizedek, Elijah. Actually, Elijah kind of sucks, because if you ever meet an Elijah in real life today, they're kind of like fucking whiny dudes. But anyway, so I remember writing on that piece of paper during my first week of secular education that my favorite subject was religion. So I remember we had to go around the room, we had to read out, our answers and stuff. And I never even had an exposure to the idea of like someone laughing at you, because I've always been, fucking charming. But I remember I got to the part where it said favorite subject, and then I read out religion. And I remember everyone laughing, and I remember having this distinct feeling of like, what the fuck is everyone laughing at? Like, what are you guys, like math, you fucking idiots? And then lo and behold, later on that day, I remember my teacher, Mrs. Bernardino, and I can say her name because she's dead. I remember I'm leaving, and she stops me. She pulls me into class, and she tells me that before she became a second grade teacher, she was originally a nun. Now, I hadn't even known what a nun was. Because again, I'm 6 and 7 in these two stories. And I really only spent 1 year at a Catholic school. And there's really no nuns left because the Freemasons have killed them all. So she explained, and it was kind of a nice moment in hindsight. Like, she was trying to, be like, hey, we're super persecuted. Let's have each other's back. Let's not throw each other to the lions. But also, plot twist for you, that lady was a cold-hearted bitch. Another example of a lot of things, it's always both. So the reason she was a cold-hearted bitch, I'll never forget this shit either. What a fucking ride second grade was. But one day, I remember a good friend of mine named Ryan, real funny kid, real fucking funny kid. Those memories of the kids that you went to school with, and even if you think you're the funny person, there was always like one or two kids who just always made you laugh. And they weren't even necessarily the kids that other kids found funny. But Ryan was a fucking hilarious dude. And when you're smart and you're funny and you're in elementary school, you are going to get in trouble pretty much every day. Your hardest subject in school will be behavior. I can tell you that. Ryan was in my boat. He always had a problem shutting up because he always had something funny to say. And that did not, sit well with Miss Bernardino, who used to be a nun, who, based on how gray her hair was, probably rapped my parents' knuckles with a ruler when they were in school. But one day, and this is past 9/11, folks, Ryan says something, and I think it was just the last straw for Miss Bernardino. She really either she had a bad day, maybe it just occurred to her she probably hadn't been fucked in 45 years, but Ryan just wouldn't stop talking, and he said something, and in front of the entire class, this former nun, which really a red flag if you think about that sentence, that title, she calls Ryan up to her desk and proceeds to pick him up. I'm not fucking kidding. 2 hands around the collar of his little 7-year-old school shirt, and you can see space between the ground and his feet. This woman picked up a 7-year-old child by the neck who was not hers and grunted through her teeth at Lil Ryan's face. And kudos to Ryan because he ate that shit. A lot of people, a lot of strong-willed people, a lot of people who would go on to do things like be in the military or, real macho shit would have been scared in that moment when you'd have a former nun hoisting you by your own petard above the ground and grunting in your face. Ryan, unfazed. Now, I don't really know what happened to Ryan, but that is something I'd never forget because I remember thinking, like, the same woman that pulled me aside to try and bond with me, to share something personal with me, I also watched her literally abuse a child in front of 24 other children without a care in the fucking world, with not a problem at all. So why have faith in the religion, in the thing, in the school of thought that has people that do that shit? That was my thinking, at least in the beginning. That was one of the first times I had, like, real-world experience with thinking, like, hold on. Just because you say you have this thing or you are that thing, that does not make you this thing. So then, my parents are still feeling guilty about only going to church twice a year, so I'm in a secular second grade now at this point, and they decide to put me in CCD. For you Episcopalians out there, CCD is kind of like Bible study, only for actual Catholics, and it doesn't happen on Wednesday night. So you'd go like, I think it was every Tuesday we had to go for like 2 hours. And it was essentially like we learned all of the religious subject that we would have learned if we would have stayed in Catholic school. So I show up, second grade, right? My CCD teacher is some old fucking crypt keeper that looks like Buddy Holly if he survived the plane crash. And he starts the very first CCD by asking the class this question. He says, who here believes that communion is literally the body of Jesus Christ? Now, me, truly, despite, I've always been a contrarian, but I don't think I was at this time. I actually was someone who liked school. I liked being right. I liked a lot of positive reinforcement because I'm kind of, cripplingly insecure at periods of time. So I raise my hand immediately and I say, no, of course not. And I think I have the right answer. I thought at that time I had the right answer because, silly me, I'm 7 and I've only seen communion maybe 5 times in my life. And I do know the word communion is not the same thing as a human person. When the priest held it up at Mass, it kind of reminded me of Miss Bernardino holding up Ryan. So I'm like, obviously, that's not Jesus. It might be a symbol. It might be symbolic of that. But it's not him. That's really what I thought. I thought I had the right answer. I thought this was a trick question designed to stump all these other 7-year-old dodos. But not me. I was going to see through his spry shit. And there was maybe like me and like 3 other people in the class who I remember like agreeing with me. We give our answer. The old, creepy crypt keeper pauses. And then he says, well, you're not Catholic then. So there's that. Can you fucking believe that? That's a grown-ass dude who volunteered to take time out of his day to teach young children about the good news and then tricks the smartest of the children in that class, not to stroke my own dick, but I'm kind of smart, into thinking, these 7-year-olds missed the boat and they can't go to heaven. That's something that happened to me also. So I had a lot of formative experiences in childhood, which, I'm sure if I told people what happened after school that day, I would just sound like a kid rambling about shit. But looking back, that really laid a groundwork or a framework for my complex relationship with the concept of believing something, of having faith without evidence, because faith is just belief without evidence. But funny enough, it seems like people are way more willing, or they have a stronger conviction in the things they believe in without evidence versus the things people believe in with evidence. There's a lot of people out there who don't want to take the coronavirus vaccine despite having a wealth of evidence that it's effective and safe. There's people willing to die for their religion. There's people willing to strap on a vest of thermonuclear devices and head to the nearest Ariana Grande concert because they have faith without evidence that this is what their religion wants them to do. Think about that for a second. Think about the forces behind the idea of being able to believe in something without evidence. In fact, everything you believe because of evidence, I would argue, you don't even actually believe. You're maybe spouting off something you've heard other people tell you, but you don't believe it. You really don't. And examples of things like that not happening are all the time. Let's say you're waiting for a motherfucking bus. You think the bus is supposed to come at 3 o'clock because that's what the schedule says. Do you believe it's going to come at 3 o'clock? If you live in fucking Philadelphia, you know that bus is showing up late, but yet you believe you should be at the station at 2:55 just in case. Why is that? Maybe it's because of evidence that it's not shown up in the past. Think about it for a second. Faith is a powerful thing. And people do this problem where they try to separate the two. Evidence, or let's just call science for, clearly you might be able to guess what path I'm going on here. Let's just call belief with evidence science, and let's call belief without evidence faith. Now, when people try, or at least a lot of smart people try to do this, and I was very guilty of being this guy for a very long time because I was always someone who thought I could outsmart you. It was only until I got smart did I realize I'm really kind of fucking dumb. And I'll explain. So the smartest people, they realize that there is a limit to what they can know, which is why they want to seek out shit. The people who think they know what it is do not take the time to research, to read, to be exposed to new ideas, because they already know what the fuck it is. It's only those wise enough, sage enough, to recognize that there is a limitation to what the human brain is capable of knowing, recalling, and processing. And they know they don't know shit, so the only way to learn some more shit is to keep looking it up. But if you're really dumb, you don't have any reason to research because you know how it works. Most people don't think it be like it is, but it do. That is one of my favorite quotes of all time. But when people try to intrinsically, rip apart people who have faith in something without evidence, they try to use it, they try to frame it in the reverse psychology sense, where they'll say, well, no, you're stupid, or you're dumb, or how could you believe this without any evidence? How could you think this part of your religion makes any fucking sense at all? We obviously know evolution. We know the Big Bang Theory. Clearly it wasn't just a guy named Adam showed up and God took out his rib, made, Lilith, I think, was his first wife. She ended up becoming a vampire or something. More on that later. And then he made Eve as his second wife. That's batshit crazy, right? Only if you're in China. But that sounds wild to people. Would it be wild to you if I told you that the Big Bang Theory was originally presented by a priest? Ain't that some shit? The idea originated with a priest, I believe from Belgium. His name was Georges Lemaire. Now, I'm not really good with any last name that has any unusual accent sign above a letter. So I'm sorry if I got that wrong. Anyone in Belgium, go fuck yourself. But the Big Bang Theory, the thing that apparently, other than maybe evolution, is the cornerstone of secular science, just science, one of the more acceptable explanations that a lot of people throw out there to contrast a lot of, creation myths within the religions of the world. When that very same scientific hypothesis, I'm not going to say fact, because who the fuck knows, was discovered and invented and proposed in great detail and length by a priest. Let's take genetics, for example. Something else people love to bring up when they try to disprove the intrinsic connection between religion and faith. Religion and faith. What a stupid fucking mick I am. Between religion and science is evolution, right? Everyone loves to point to evolution. Everyone loves to wear the fucking t-shirt from the museum gift shop of natural sciences with the evolution of man on it. That shit is tried and boring. Evolution, a lot of it, apart from, Charles Darwin, who married his first cousin, creepy. Yeah, and just a little sidetrack. All these, great secular or atheist scientists and thinkers that you read about in history were into some of the weirdest shit of all time, or they married their cousin or sister. Albert Einstein. Edgar Allan Poe, not a scientist, but he was the only other guy I could think of who married a family relative. So Charles Darwin, everyone knows him as the guy who presents evolution. Hey, there were originally tadpoles. Those tadpoles were adventurous. Eventually, their adventurous nature willed themselves to grow little tadpole legs. They walk out of the ocean. Tadpoles with the legs, fresh out the ocean, turn into monkeys. Something about the Galapagos Islands. Something, more monkeys. Something, people. Something, I'm gonna go fuck my first cousin. Have you ever heard of the priest Gregor Mandel? So Gregor Mandel, he was a monk from Austria. And if you've taken high school biology, you probably remember him as the guy who, periodic table of elements, large contribution to that was thanks to Gregor Mandel. He was also the guy that created, he's essentially known as the father of genetics. He was the guy that created the allele chart, little a, big A, blah, 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 MCR1. He's the guy behind a lot of the base level of knowledge Charles Darwin was drawing upon when he took breaks from fucking his cousin to create the evolution hypothesis. So when anyone tries to separate these concepts, or at least make them seem like they're diametrically opposed, it is in fact quite the opposite. And evolution was really one of the first concepts or thoughts that I remember thinking, wait a minute, the answer to this could be both, right? Just because we're going to accept evolution doesn't mean there's no God or we shouldn't have a religion. in my head, and I was probably like 13 or 14 at the time, just a normal 13, 14-year-old watching the Phillies, contemplating God and its relationship to science. It occurred to me, probably out of nowhere, or probably because was a Native American chief in a past life, that evolution could just very easily be the physical thing, the physical process that we get to see in the way that God creates people, life, things, animals, plants, all that good stuff. And that makes a lot of fucking sense to me still. If God creates all people, if religion, or if whatever faith, whatever creator you so choose, if that thing is what creates life, what creates people, there has to be a process to which things happen. That's just logic. That's just physics. An object in motion remains in motion. You know what I'm saying? So if God's going to do some shit, we got to be able to eventually see some signs of shit being done. So wouldn't it make sense that if God wanted to, have people, maybe he started with a more primitive thing, with a thing that, wasn't his best work? Because, I forget who said it, but if you're not morbidly embarrassed by your first piece of work, you have not tried hard enough. So maybe he made a bunch of people, populated the earth. We looked very, monkey-ish. And we just kept getting it wrong up until we built, the Tower of Sodom and Babylon and tried to butt fuck into the heavens until God said, you know what, maybe I should, try again. I'm going to tell Noah, build a boat, hold off. I'm going to send in the cavalry. Now, I might have gone off on a little bit of a tangent there, but the larger point is evolution could just be another way in which stuff happens. It could be a way you see things. Another example I like to have and bring up with friends who, friends of mine who like to act like they're really intellectually enlightened, would be this question, and I love it. It is one of my favorite fucking questions. Did human beings invent math, or did human beings discover math? I'll give you a second to answer it in your head. I'll give you a second to take a break from fucking your cousin, if you're Charles Darwin. And if you've seen Charles Darwin's cousin, you ain't taking a break, playa. No. So the answer to that question, I don't know because I'm smart. But I have a hunch the answer is we discovered it. Because math, in terms of how it relates to the nature and the plane of existence we operate on, is expressed in the form of physics. The rules to physics, gravity, why things move, the essential science behind motion, right? So those things were happening way before you were ever around, before I ever asked you that question, before you ever hit play on my podcast with my stupid face and a visor looking at you. Before you showed up, the laws of physics still applied, so you sure as fuck didn't discover them. You see what I'm saying? It would be impossible to. And if you're going to discover that, let's take, who's that fucking virgin with the dumb name with the apple? Oh, Isaac Newton, right? He's sitting under a tree, apple hits him on the head, boom, he invents calculus or whatever. He could only prove or defend, I guess is the academic term they use, he could only defend his new theory of calculus because it was true, because it existed, because it actually worked. Someone other than him could objectively replicate the same results. That's not inventing anything. You can't invent something that is objectively repeatable by everybody. What you just did is discover something. That's not how this shit works. Take Albert Einstein, for example. He was another guy who had a complicated relationship with faith. Another guy that married and fucked his family members. Another guy who really warped the way science thinks about things. The theory of relativity. I'm not really going to try and explain it because, wow. But he was one of the first dudes to propose that maybe time doesn't work in the way we think it does. Maybe time isn't just a linear progression into nothingness. In fact, maybe time is happening both forwards and backwards and in a circle in the shape of a donut. And I know that was a lot to say. In the donut part, you're probably thinking, what? Well, earlier this week, I think it was Vice, the news outlet that used to be great that ended up fucking awful. The one that was run by Gavin McInnes before he started shooting heroin, ironically. So Vice wrote this article in which I think it was Switzerland, of course, where a team of scientists came to the proposal, or the hypothesis, I should say, that the universe, the entire universe that we exist in, not just the Milky Way, that's our galaxy, the universe, the entire sandbox available to us dodo birds, perhaps is donut-shaped. Perhaps it's a three-dimensional donut shape with a hole that kind of continuously loops and feeds into itself. Boy, if that's true, think about time now. Where's it going? How's it happening? Because scientifically speaking, time is just expressed as how fast light travels. When you turn on a switch in your house, that amount of passing seconds between it being dark and it being light is time. But time is relative. Why is time relative? Well, one, Albert Einstein said so while in Princeton, while being a part of numerous secret society shits. If you have a minute, go walk around Princeton and ask yourself, what the fuck? Anyway, so time being relative really, again, would warp how this works. Because a lot of people would point to people of faith and say that your faith is just, it was put into you. It wasn't something you came to on your own. It was something that your parents taught you, and it was just hammered into your head while you were young. Why do you even believe this stuff? It's all so old and irrelevant and not based on anything. Does that really stand up anymore if we start to recognize, even in the secular community of scientists and lab coat wearing motherfuckers, they start to recognize that perhaps time is not what we think it is. Perhaps time is always moving forward and backwards. So the argument, why believe in this old stuff, starts to get a little weak. Perhaps this old stuff you're referring to is just, the ramblings of people who lived before television and air conditioning. Perhaps these things will happen again. Perhaps they're happening right now. Perhaps a lot of the symbolism in a lot of religious scriptures maybe are talking about things we already talk about in society today. Why is it that almost every religion has some form of aliens attached to it? The Hindus, Muslims, Jews, Jewish people. I could never tell how I'm supposed to say Jewish people or Jews, because Jews somehow feels like it's become a bad word. I'm not saying it in a bad way. I love the Jewish people. If I could pick any other, ethnic group to be born into, Italian obviously would be the first one. Second one, very close, not far behind, would be the Jewish people. They're real tight. They're merchants, good business people, good head on their shoulders, good writers. Comedians are starting to get a little trite, but, you can't dominate everything forever. Same thing with the NBA. They used to kill it. They're not really in it anymore. So now they're just the fans who bet on it. Anyway, why is it all these religions, all these, groups of faith on our planet today have a lot of these similarities in common? Granted, they use different words and different, cultural ideas to express them, but they share a lot of similarities. Take a motherfucking vampire, for example. A lot of people think vampires aren't real. A lot of people think vampires are things that were hunted by Wesley Snipes before he was imprisoned by the IRS. Those people would be right. Wesley Snipes does hunt vampires. However, did you know that vampires are around in pretty much every cultural folklore, mythology in the world, dating back to times when everyone in those parts of the world didn't even know there was other fucking parts of the world? There are vampires in Chinese mythology, in European mythology, obviously. Native Americans had a term for vampires. The concept of things that sustained and existed off the life force of others, which could be found in almost every religious scripture around town. Why is that? How are they aware of each other? It's not like, Lewis and Clark went off to China and say, hey, you guys heard about, the fucking monster universe and the Mummy and Bram Stoker and all those people? And the Chinese people were like, I'm not even going to do that. Never mind. Have a bat. Here's some bat soup, traveler, white man. Anyway, how did all these cultures become aware of something that other cultures were already aware of? And why did they write it down? Maybe these concepts aren't that old. Maybe they're new and old. Maybe they're current and past. Maybe they're present. Why? Why is that? Why does it seem like, and I think, and I'm not going to keep asking why rhetorically out loud, because that's what most podcasts are with people who don't have guests. But I think personally that a lot of the instances in which people try to discredit someone who has a belief in something without evidence, aka faith, is more likely than not that person having an irreconcilable problem with the topic at hand. For example, anyone who doesn't want to link evolution to religion, rather than, let's say, opening up Pandora's box to completely alter their entire framework of belief and thought and what they think is their role in the universe and the universe at large, rather than reevaluate all of that. They are just going to blindly ignore the evidence the other person is presenting and not allow the thought that maybe religion and science could perhaps be linked. Because it's scary to reevaluate your entire belief system. But it's also something that I think should be done. Because a theme that I like to talk about is just how persuadable and malleable people are. People's minds are malleable. I would argue people are hardwired to believe in things. Why do we still have a bunch of books from 6,000 years ago? Why do so many different cultures all have similar stories about fairies, demons, banshees, dragons, vampires? Why? And I know I said I wasn't going to do that, but haha, it's my show, fuck y'all. Why is that? Because the evidence would at least suggest to me that there has to be something to it. And I'm someone who, what really tips me over the edge in thinking something's true or not, is if you get that feeling, in the lower part of your stomach, right before the nether regions, that I'm not sure what, but I just feel, I just can tell, I can sense that there is something to this. So let me take you back to my journey. So I'm hitting middle school, right? And I'm still at the secular school, and I'm starting to take English class. And I loved English class. English is my native tongue. I can't speak any other language because I'm a stupid American. But I loved English class. I took to that shit like white on rice, homie. E.E. Cummings, Ernest Hemingway, F. Scott Fitzgerald, all that good shit. F. Scott, a little too flowery with the language for my taste, but Hemingway, fucking tremendous writer. Other than The Sun Also Rises, which the title itself is just a reference to a dude's hard dick. That's a real fact. But I got really wrapped up in this whole modernism, postmodernism, really getting into like these intellectuals, these artists who couldn't draw but were just masters of the written word. I really got into that. Like these people that I was reading in school, not even, well, then eventually for my own fun, but like these people were like my rock stars, my athletes. I really related with them because for some reason, and I couldn't quite put my finger on it, I could just tell that there was something of value, of substance in these people, in Sylvia Plath's works, in Charlotte Bronte. In fact, actually, fuck Charlotte Bronte. Wuthering Heights is still one of the worst books, one of the most boring, unnecessary, irrelevant pieces of shit in human existence. And Sylvia Plath put her head in an oven. So maybe those two weren't the best examples. But I could just feel that there was an element of importance to what these people were doing. But unfortunately, attached to these people, I think in most cases is this deep, inherent sadness because they have misplaced or over-intellectualized faith out of their head. They've all, for the most part, and I know I'm massively generalizing, but, that's what I do. All of these people who were these great new thinkers who proposed these radical ideas, these beatniks, these street hippies, Allen Ginsberg, all those fucking people, Bukowski, right? All these people, they weren't religious. In fact, a lot of them railed against organized religion, which is a cool, sexy thing to do when you want to say, hey, I'm against organized religion. I'm going to poke fun at that. But I'm spiritual. You're not. That's a cop-out. So these people, I think, were geniuses who were deeply traumatized in some way from childhood. Maybe their, first cousin married them and fucked them. Who knows? But a lot of these people, the issue or the pain that, gave their work such merit was the fact that they decided to go against the natural human instinct, which is the desire to believe something without evidence. Because if you lose that and you live your entire life based on the need to only believe stuff that you can see or have proven to you, you are not going to get far, and you're sure as fuck not going to be happy because it is increasingly rare to come across universal truths. And if you'd like an explanation to that sentence, check out the last episode. But these things that are true are few and far between. And when you decide that you as one fucking person actually knows what's going on, even if you're a fucking literary genius, you're wrong. You are on a fool's errand, homie. It is not going to end well with you. It will end with you feeling very sad, unable to accept compliments, and most likely put your head in an oven. But The Yellow Wallpaper was good. That was a cool short story. about a guy who slept with his dead mother in the bed. Actually, no, I think that was something like a rose or whatever. Yellow Wallpaper was about the bitch who gave birth and then went crazy and was like a little person attached to the wallpaper or something. I don't know. Enough of the literary shit. Who is going to like that? No one is going to get any of these references, but fucking anyway. People are built to want to believe in stuff. And when you actively try to not believe in stuff, you're creating this void that you're going to try and fill. Be that with fucking self-indulgent melancholy, drugs and alcohol, sex with people you really regret having sex with, anger, yelling at people, not communicating effectively, hatred in your heart, hatred in your mind, herpes of the dick. All of these things are possible when you go against what is naturally intrinsic to being a person in the first place. St. Anselm, he was a philosopher whose main contribution to philosophy was something called the ontological argument. And the ontological argument says this: his proof, or quote-unquote proof, for the existence of a God was the mere fact that we were able to think of one. Think about that for a second. He argued that the fact we were able to have this concept of a God, of a creator, of a thing that is bigger than us, in charge, maybe not even in charge, maybe he's playing hands off, but still has, the whistle where he'll blow and call foul in case everyone builds a buttfuck temple up towards heaven. His argument for this was the fact that we can even conceive of it, which is almost like this stamp, this fucking signature that, a painter would put on the bottom of his work. And while, that may seem a little elementary and maybe not enough for most people, because I can think of a banana, doesn't mean a banana shows up, but there is something there, though, and I can't put my finger on it. I can't, describe it as well as he did, but there's something about that argument that relates to me because it feels both shockingly simple and like surprisingly complex at the same time. And when, something feels like a whole hell of a lot of both, you've probably stumbled upon something worth knowing. So animals can't do this. Animals don't get together. They don't go to the Serengeti when they're, drinking out of the Lion King pond and they say, hey, you know what, giraffe? I have this idea that there's a God. That doesn't happen. Maybe it does in like Pixar movies and shit, or VeggieTales would have been a better example there. But us as humans do it. We're the only thing on this fucking earth that do. And we're the only thing in the books of all religious scriptures that say we are something different than animals. And if there's something that we're all capable of conceiving of that animals aren't, can't put my finger on it, but it feels like there's something there. Faith is a fucking trip, man. It really is. So I'm going through high school. I'm really getting into books and really getting into feeling smart. I like to, just really kind of falsely attach my identity with like intellectualism, which looking back is the most eye-rolling, annoyingly douchey little fucking pretentious phase that I had as a person. And as a kid, I was someone who was really into skateboarding in the mid-2000s, going so far as to shop at Hot Topic and buy a white leather studded belt. That was something I did. And I still feel worse about how I used to behave, in regards of acting like this phony 14-year-old intellectual in a cardigan, than wearing a faux white leather studded belt and riding a skateboard. So I'm going on through life. I'm hitting towards the end of high school, and, I'm learning sociology and all those fucking weirdos who are just running awful, cruel, inhumane prison experiments on people and all that good shit. Learning about Pavlov and Freud, talking about, everyone's smoking a cigar that they think's their mom's dick or something like that. So I'm really getting wrapped up in that shit. And then I finally, I get out of high school, and then I go to college. And I go to college in New Jersey, which is a state that's towards the bottom of my list, I think, in terms of states. I know there's 50 of them. New Jersey's bottom 40, or bottom 10. I don't know how to say that. Basically, there's maybe Arkansas, Mississippi, Florida, few obvious ones, but New Jersey fucking sucks. And you can't turn left there. What kind of fucking states people are just scared of a direction? That makes absolutely no sense. Anyway, so I go to college in New Jersey, and I take this philosophy class because I had to, for one. But I also love philosophy. I ended up minoring in it. It was something that I loved. I have this habit in life where I love to have skills and knowledge, and I'm basically interested in hobbies that I can never, make money off of, like books, philosophy, comedy, things that no one gives a fuck about or will ever pay you to do. So I take this philosophy class, and the philosophy professor Short little dude, one of those, white people that now claims to be Buddhist, but is probably just ethnically Jewish. You know what I'm talking about? So I really got into it because if you've ever been to college in a philosophy class, there's like 4 kids who are into it, and the rest might as well be, fucking dead. Like they're literally corpses sitting in chairs. But then the professor recognizes the 4 kids that are into it, and then more than I think almost any other subject in college, you can really develop a genuine academic intellectual back and forth and like actually have some cool conversations of substance. So I remember, I think we were learning about the theories of the universe, in which I think there was 3 main ones, but one of them presented was this concept in which perhaps the universe, or the period of time, the planet, the thing we exist in currently, if we know, or at least science argues, that the universe is ever expanding because of red gamma rays or whatever they're recently making up to prove their nonsense, maybe it's always contracting. But if something's always contracting, it must always be... I said that backwards. Always expanding, but then also contracting. Because at the very beginning of the Big Bang Theory, which was, brought up by a priest at first, the universe was fit on the size of a pin, right? Like the head of a pin. It was everything that ever came to be now at one point was condensed. But now who's to say that that was the first time that happened? Maybe the first condensed, pinpoint head thing that led to the Big Bang Theory. Maybe that was the second time that happened. Maybe that was the 100th time that everything was condensed to that size. See what I mean? It could just because we think that's what happened and there's some physics to suggest it, doesn't mean it was the first fucking time it happened. So one of the proposed theories was that our existence, it happens in between the expansions before the contractions. So maybe we're alive during the 3rd expansion, and when our sun blows up in next Tuesday or 4 billion years from now, and then everything condenses back down to the size of a pinhead, and then explodes again later, and then Earth happens, and then those tadpoles are in the water, and those tadpoles get legs, they walk out of the ocean, they become monkeys, blah, 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 blah. And it gave me this thought that, so, who fucking cares? Why does that matter? In fact, what does that even answer? It doesn't mean shit. Cool thought. Trippy dude, who gives a fuck though? What are you telling me? Is there a God or not? Let's get to the bottom of this, dude. Which then inspired me to so I wrote this paper. I also wrote papers for other people in that class for money because easy way to make money. Anyway, so I wrote this paper for this dude. It was called, Unfortunately, I Think There's a God, which I thought was a clever ass title. I really did. I thought I was a motherfucking David Foster Wallace with that shit. But in the paper, I argue that the theory of contraction and expansion, the theory that basically there are all these things that perhaps are true, perhaps would change entire belief systems, would radically alter what we think is the role of humans. Perhaps all these cool thought experiments are true, or perhaps they're not. But the fact that perhaps they're not is still on the table, to me, I had this epiphany where there's just some things we will never know. And we could argue, technology is always going to be increasing. Eventually, we're going to hit a singularity with AI and become supercomputers and blah, blah, blah. But there are still, even when we've hit that point, things we're not going to know. And once we hit that point, who knows? Maybe the universe contracts again and we all go back down to the size of a pinhead and the whole thing starts over again. We're not going to know because we're not going to be around for that. And the people who are around after that, hypothetically, will never know about us. They'll never fucking know about us. I'm sure there was an entire universe before ours. Perhaps there could be. I could just as easily tell you that there was, and I could just as easily tell you that there wasn't. What you could do is decide to either believe me because I have evidence, or you could believe me because I don't, which would be taking faith in what I'm saying. And faith, I think, is pragmatic more than I think it's anything else, because there are so many things about our experience, about the human condition, that we will never know, that it is impossible to know. And there are so many of these things, and they are so overwhelming, and they're so able to make you feel small and useless and insignificant, because really, at the end of the day, most of you are. Actually, pretty much all of us are, because that's the beauty of being a person, that we can be with other people. One person can't do shit. That's why a lot of kings only lasted a week, and they were never written down in history books because they said, I'm king, and everyone else said, fuck off, and ate him or killed him or, whatever the villagers did. So because there's so many things we'll never know, and because our condition as someone, alive is so impermanent, and the fact that we're fucking cursed with knowing that, faith is the thing. It's the tool that allows us to not lose our fucking minds, that allows us to not, go crazy in a room after giving birth to a daughter surrounded by yellow wallpaper until we turn into a little tiny devil fairy thing. Faith is the thing that helps us think, well, I don't need to know everything. I can just believe it. Because if you only need evidence to believe things, you are putting way too much faith in the people who are claiming to be gathering evidence. There's a lot of people who claim to have evidence of nonsense. You ever been to the Scientology Museum? I lived in LA for a year before I went homeless and had to come back. But while I was out there, one of my favorite pastimes was fucking with Scientologists. Truly. L. Ron Hubbard, if you're listening, or if I already met you earlier in life, fuck off again a second time. Fuck you, really. Like, awful, awful people. So you could take a tour of the Scientology Museum on Sunset, and you could walk in, and you get a nice tour by a nice, obviously hot, but like not like too sexy, like a girl next door-ish, runaway from Wisconsin kind of thing. She'll give you a great tour. She'll tell you all about L. Ron and all about, the fact that he's literally the most prolifically published author of fucking fiction books, of science fiction books in American history to this day. Literally the man who wrote the most amount of lies on paper. She'll give you this great tour. And then eventually you'll let your guard down and you'll stop thinking like, well, this is a brainwashed Manson girl. She's just maybe, I don't believe in it, but maybe it's not as bad as I think. And this feeling will grow on you as you continue to take a tour through John Travolta's place of solace until the end of the tour, and you're presented with this machine. I forget what the machine's called, but it doesn't matter because they're all idiots. But it has, it's like this metal sphere thing that has two handles on the sides. And you hold on to your hands on the handles because that's what, hand, handle, blah, blah, blah. And then in the middle is like this thing you'd see on like a grill that would indicate like the heat, like it would go from green, red, blah, blah, blah. So I hold it, and then I look to the runaway from Wisconsin, and I say, now what? And she says, this is a fucking blah, 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 blah. And I say, what does that do? And she says, well, the blah, blah, blah does this. All of your thoughts have a value of either negative or positive. And what this machine does is read your thoughts and assign a numerical value to them. That's about how long I stared at that dum-dum's face and said, really? How about you go first? So she did, just to prove to me it's safe. It wasn't like something Jack Parsons cooked up and forgot before he summoned a devil and fucked off into eternity and, left with Elron or whatever. So she did it. Her thoughts read, kind of good, kind of bad, like most people. So then I hop on the machine. Turns out my thoughts read exactly the same as hers. Isn't that crazy? Fuck you. Fuck y'all. But that is an example of someone offering evidence of like, hey, man, I know what I think sounds crazy, but we got this machine that proves it. No, you don't. You have a machine. Maybe you didn't plug it in, or maybe it doesn't work. Maybe the guy who is the founder of your religion is also the most published author of literal bullshit. Maybe the fact that the Mormons, who are a group, actually, real quick with the Mormons, I don't want to say all Mormons are bad people, because they're not. They're actually some of the more nicer and polite people. But the philosophy that is Mormonism can fuck all the way off. It can just fuck itself. Mormonism is about as useful as a bag of dicks without a handle. Maybe if all the people that leave Mormonism after the increasingly strange salamander scandals, all the people that leave the Church of Mormon, do you know what religion they think is most similar and, a little more conservative and palatable for them? That would be Scientology. If your religion is considered too extreme for Scientology, and Scientology would be a more laxed option, maybe you're all fucking crazy. And I don't mean to judge, but I am, because that's what the resting human brain does. I hate it when people say, oh, don't judge. I try not to judge. What do you mean you try not to judge? You judge every fucking day. That's how you're not killed. That's how you don't get fucking hit by cars at stop signs. Because you're looking around saying, is that a stop sign? It's red. I guess I judge I should stop. That's what the human brain does. So judge. The people who are telling you not to judge are probably up to some shit. Probably doing some strange, nefarious nonsense that they don't want you to know about. So they're going to say these things, these cool tricks where they say, don't judge. Don't judge. Don't pay attention to the guy behind the curtain. Don't pay attention to the fact that our Scientology mind reading machine gave us both the same readings for our thoughts. Come on, Rachel, or whatever the fuck your name was. Do a better job as a tour guide. I was a tour guide when I worked as a tour guide in college. Half the shit I just made up. I think I said, like, the guy who created Wawa went to Ryder. I think I said that, I guess the cat's out of the bag. But, yeah, I went to Ryder in New Jersey. And I would just make stuff up because the job wasn't to relay information. The job was to entertain these parents who took a day off from their shitty job to take their fucking spoiled 17-year-old on a tour around a suburban Sims campus, which charges fucking $80,000 a year just to sleep there. So they didn't want to hear me talk about, like, the recidivism rate. I don't know if that has something to do with jail or kids staying in college after the first year, or both. Isn't that interesting? But they didn't want to hear stats. They didn't want to hear about, hard numbers. They wanted to be entertained. They wanted to feel like the kid giving the introduction to this potential college for their child is someone that they would be comfortable with their kid knowing, with being friends with, for lack of a better term. Like, my idea was just let me perform for these kids, for these families, and just make them feel comfortable. Obviously, I'm not lying to the extent of completely making shit up like we have an incredible nursing program when we just literally didn't even have a nursing program. Can't go that far because eventually that gets back to you. But you can just fib things because you're just trying to give people what they want in that moment. And a lot of times people don't even know what they want, but you can read it off of them. You can see it. You could feel what people want, and they don't even know. A lot of times people are the last to know what they think they want. So I was giving it to him because that's how I mover and shaker. Where was I going with this? Oh, yeah. So Scientology. Scientology's batshit crazy. But every religion sounds batshit crazy. For as crazy as, Scientology sounds to any human being who's not in the movie Battlefield Earth, every religion's fucking nuts. Catholicism's the most popular religion in the world. It's, at least by my estimation, probably the most accurate, but who knows? I'm definitely biased, but bias isn't even a bad thing in a lot of cases. A lot of cases it is, but sometimes it's not. The religion that I subscribe to, albeit relatively new in the sense that I actually feel like I kind of believe it way more than I ever have in my life before, half of the shit in Catholicism is bonkers, batshit bananas. None of it makes any sense. Jesus walked on water, turned a couple loaves of bread into fish for 1,000 people at the marriage of the king of Thebes or whatever. I haven't finished the Bible. It's kind of hard to read. Most of the things in it are crazy. Take Hinduism, right? You're not allowed to eat cows because a cow is a god in their religion. Now, as a Westerner, like, it's very easy to make fun of that concept, but dig into the Bible, Old Testament, full of a lot of weird shit with goats. Don't fuck them. Stop sacrificing them. A lot of weird animal stuff in all religions. So you see, like any religion, you could pick points, you could cherry pick things and say, that's weird. That's why I'm going to pick that one strange, perhaps antiquated, perhaps a thing that was recorded by humans, not God, and they maybe got some of it wrong or it was lost in translation. I'm going to pick that one thing, and then that's why I'm going to discredit your entire belief system. The reason you are who you are, I'm going to pick that shit apart. That's not cool. That's not fair. That's really unfair. That's not even academically competitive. And at the very least, try and do that. That's not too much to ask for. Just keep it fucking real. Don't just be a dick. Be able to entertain a thought you may not agree with just so you could have a conversation and maybe understand each other a little bit better. But only smart people do that because, remember, dum-dums actually know what the deal is. Why is that? Who knows? I sure as fuck don't know. But the reason I ended up getting a little back into religion was because in college, back to this paper. So I write the unfortunately, I think there's a God paper. And in the paper, I argue that, or at least I kind of come to the realization that we will never be able to know some stuff, which to me suggests once I hit that point where I am incapable of knowing everything, which obviously I knew that if you asked me, but also there comes a moment where you really, really, truly get it and feel that like, oh, this shit is infinite. I am just one guy. I'm the opposite of infinite. I am finite, motherfucker. I am not going to know everything. The second that hits you, to me, that just implied, well, nothing is, burning. There is some order to the world. There are physics. We are not just free falling in cold space. So there has to be some order to this. And that's when I'm like, fuck. The order, or the thing keeping everything together, oh, shit. That has to be God. That's essentially the argument that I made, where I was someone who over-intellectualized the need for faith out of my life. It led me to feel kind of empty, kind of hollow, someone who probably developed a large part of his personality to overcompensate for the things that were self-imposed that were missing from my personality. I love making people laugh, so much so that I need to go on stage in front of strangers who I'll never see again, but I still need them to tell me they like me. Please, please, please tell me they like me. Tell me you like me. Make up for what my parents did. That's fucking sad when you put it that way, but that's also most comedians. Most people healthy people don't care if strangers like them. I do. I need you to like me. I need you to like me so much, I am willing to embarrass myself. I am willing to perform at Voltage Lounge, opening for DJ Diamond Cuts in front of a crowd without chairs, waiting for music only to see me, my dumb McAss, walk out on stage and try and tell a Chris Brown joke right after he, roundhouse kicked Rihanna in the face. Needless to say, it did not go well, and I got booed off stage and thought there was going to be a race riot, all because I didn't really try hard enough on that Chris Brown joke. That's how desperately I want people to like me, or at least think that kid's clever. And that's probably because there was a part, or at least a period in my life, where I felt like I was missing something firm or a foundation, or this I don't need to compensate feeling, because I'm good, because I know shit is all right for the most part. I didn't feel that way for a while, which led me to evolve into who I am now. But at the same time, who I am now is someone who worked my way back to that. But when you are able to work your way back to something you used to believe in, a lot of times when you get back there, your conviction in that belief is tenfold stronger because you spent some time not believing it. And people who then, and one of the main criticisms of religion is that you didn't choose it, your fucking parents just told you shit. And that was one of the things that originally got me to think I was an atheist for a while, because my parents all of a sudden, because of reasons I know, but I don't want to get into, they ended up getting way more religious by the time I'm like 13 or 14. And I'm like, what the fuck are you waking me up on Saturday to go to this thing that I know you don't give a shit about? Like, what did this happen all of a sudden? Or Sunday. Jesus, excuse me. Jesus, I shouldn't have said that there either. Wow, you see how this is happening? So my parents get a little more religious. By default, I start having to go to church on Sundays, and I'm just fucking belligerent about it. I don't want to do this shit. I don't want to listen to these stories that are written in a dialect and syntax that you cannot convince me people in Syria were talking that way. Come on, bruh. I hated it. I really did. It felt so unnecessary. In fact, churches, almost, if I'm being honest, even still today, and I'm not against them anymore, they still kind of give me a weird feeling. There's something, a lot of people say awe-inspiring. I don't even want to say that because that sounds a little too positive. There's something about the atmosphere of everybody being in a uniquely designed space, all looking in one direction at one guy and the large group of people all talking in unison, chanting, recanting. Just it feels weird to me, and I don't know if that's because I am just fiercely independent to a fault, and I do everything I can to not be labeled or feel like a part of a group, or maybe it's because of Miss Bernardino picking Ryan Davis up by his collar and gritting in his teeth. Or maybe it's because of the fucking corpse buddy Holly who taught CCD to me and told me I wasn't Catholic when I thought I was giving the right answer at 6. Could be a whole host of things. But that still doesn't take away from the fact that I have a very unique feeling while I'm in there. It isn't even necessarily always good. It can be a little scary. But it hit me that maybe that feeling I'm having is another one of those, I can't put my finger on it, but there's something there. If something makes you feel a certain way and you can't explain why, there's probably something there. I'm sure there's some of you out there who just don't even like to think about space. Let's try this example. I'm one of those people. I am fascinated by space. I used to love NASA. I was into NASA before Kohl's started selling NASA t-shirts and everyone acted like it was cool again for some reason, which I would like to know why. Why is it like 4 or 5 years ago, it seems like NASA hired a new head of PR or something? Like, why did that happen? And then, of course, you can do some of your own digging and find out pretty much NASA was in bed with everyone at the CIA. Pretty much NASA is just former Nazis and, occult warlocks who like to summon Set and aliens from the great beyond. All of that is true. Not going to get into it. You could research some of that on your own. Jack Parsons was crazy, and also Parsons Institute and the guy who invented rocket propulsion, and also claimed to have literally conjured through a book of spells a demon. Yeah. So, Jack Parsons, he was a man of science. He was sure as fuck a man of faith. I mean, when he went to his local, Borders bookstore, wherever in Florida, and, got out the fucking Grimoire, I'm not even going to try and pronounce it, got out the Book of Spells and was like, hey, eeny, meeny, miny, pick this one, and then goes home, gets, a suitable virgin to put in the middle of the pentagram and then try and summon the devil, but then go to work at NASA on Monday. That is a man who hella existed in both faith and science. He had no evidence that the spell was going to work, but it did. And if some of you are like, what the fuck am I talking about? 1, good. 2, true what I'm saying. Very, very true. Look into Jack Parsons if you can. Mind you, do you know who was a close friend of Jack Parsons? L. Ron Hubbard. But let's get off Scientology. There are things you're never going to know. That's something you got to accept first and foremost. But if you decide that you're only going to accept things that people prove to you with evidence, it's impossible, because we just said there's things you're not going to know. So what you're doing is setting yourself up to fail. And people set themselves up to fail all the time. That's another thing that is just tragically intrinsic to people. People love to self-sabotage. I don't know why that is, but I sure as fuck do it. I can't tell you how many times I have fucked myself over because I just wanted to fuck myself over. I don't know what it is. It's the same reason I bet that whenever I'm up like on a tall building and I look down, or wherever I'm like on heights, I'm not suicidal in the least. And I know that's not even a hot take anymore. I know it's cool to be very depressed, but I'm not. I'm actually pretty happy. But anytime I'm up somewhere very high, I still get this urge to just fucking jump off of it. I don't know why. It's not even like I want to die, but it's just like, well, time to jump, It's a weird thing. I'm sure it's how people feel on boats who get seasick, but they're kind of pussies, if we're being honest. How can you not fucking be on a boat? How did you get to this country, fucko? Anyway, it's weird, man, having faith. It's weird. Thomas was a fucking apostle. He was literally one of the 12 dudes that just walked around the Middle East with short Jewish Jesus. And even he fell victim to requiring evidence. When Jesus showed up at his door, said, knock, knock, not dead, and Thomas said, prove it. But you know who didn't? You know who didn't need proof? Do you know who performed anonymous, countless acts of charity for orphans, cancer victims, and everything in between? For cancer victims who were once orphans. Do you know who went out of his way to devote his life to helping those people? Not because he knew he would have a reward, not because he knew he would be admired, not for any of these reasons, not for anything. There was nothing that he knew was going to happen because of it. But George Michael did it. George Michael. I respect you because you had faith that doing good would be good, that helping people is helping people and helping yourself. I'm not going to hold the fact that you were, getting gay blown in a public restroom and, somewhere in Burbank or whatever happened. And sure, the one earring with the long little dangly cross was one of the gayest things I've ever seen. I'm talking pants up to your nipples gay in a bad way. Not gay like Yuletide Christmas. I'm talking gay. But George Michael is still one of the more charitable people that you've never known about. So look into that. And next time you've decided to call someone stupid for believing a certain thing without evidence, take a look at your own evidence first.